And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, December 30th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. I hope everybody is doing well. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So like I said, hope everybody is doing well, had a good holiday. So let's get into what we're going to discuss. So we're going to talk about the Commanders-Falcons game from last night. Commanders winning in overtime and clinching a playoff spot. We'll get into that. We'll also talk about the Bengals and their odds of making the playoffs going into this final week of the regular season. They picked up a huge win on Saturday in overtime against the Broncos, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have kind of struggled since we last spoke. They have lost 3 games in a row now, and it looks like they are going to be a wild card team once again. But there's still a chance that they could win the division, but it's probably not going to happen in my opinion. So we'll talk about them and whether or not they are a legit threat going into the playoffs. Now, they did clinch a playoff spot, so they're in, but now it's about, are they a threat to some of these other teams? And based off of what we saw these last 3 weeks, doesn't look like it. But we'll get into that conversation. We'll also talk about the New York Giants winning a game yesterday, putting up 45 points. And now that has kind of hurt their draft positioning because now they have gone from the first overall spot to now the 4th overall spot in the NFL draft. So we'll get into that. And then we will preview the NFC Championship game rematch from last year between the Lions and the 49ers. And that will take us right to the end of the show. So how this week is going to play out is we'll have a show today. No show from Tuesday through Thursday, and then we'll be back on Friday, and then the following week is business as usual. So yeah, this is the final show of 2024, and then Friday will be the first show of 2025. So that's how this week is going to play out. But yeah, it's been a while since we last spoke, and again, hope everybody is doing well. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Commanders' win over the Falcons last night. So, these last couple weeks, Michael Penix has started for the Falcons, and from what we have seen so far, there are things to like. Obviously, last night was his second career start, so, it's not going to be perfect. He had that interception early on, which there was some miscommunication between him and his receiver, but I did like some of the things I saw from him last night. And Jaden Daniels, right now, he looks like he is the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And, in the beginning of the game, this game kind of went back and forth because in the beginning of the game, it looked like it was going to be a rout. The Commanders were going to run away with this thing. But then the Falcons defense kind of stepped up. They held the Commanders offense down. They did a very nice job limiting Terry McLaurin. I think he only had 1 catch last night. A.J. Terrell, their top corner, was on him, and he did a nice job shutting McLaurin down. So we saw a lot of Olamide Zaccheaus and a lot of Zach Ertz as well last night. He caught the game-winning touchdown in overtime. But this was a very entertaining game. There were some pretty good games this past weekend in the NFL, and this was one of them. And this, if you remember, got flexed into Sunday night. And I was curious to see how Michael Penix was going to do. Now you go from starting against the Giants last week, a 1 o'clock game or an early game, and now you're playing in prime time, for a playoff spot because, the Falcons really needed this game last night. They held the division lead from the Buccaneers after the Bucs lost to the Cowboys last week, so they needed to win this game, and now it kind of goes back into the Bucs' favor going into the final week of the season. So, yeah, so how this game kind of started off, the Falcons got the ball, and Michael Penix did throw a pick on 3rd and 9. They were about to be on midfield, but throws a pick, and the Commanders turned that into 7 points. They went for it on 4th and 2, and it was a good play design. Jaden Daniels, he hits Olamide Zaccheaus for a 7-yard touchdown, so that made it 7-0. And then the Commanders kind of got shut down after that. The Falcons, they responded going 10 plays, 70 yards down the field, and it was a direct snap to Bijan Robinson for a 1-yard touchdown. He also had another touchdown later in the game. Jane Daniels actually ended up throwing a pick. That led to another Falcons touchdown. That was the second Bijan Robinson touchdown. And then Riley Patterson from 39 yards out kicked a 39-yard field goal, so that made it 17-7. So, yeah, it wasn't looking good for the Commanders after the first half. But then, first drive of the second half, they went right down the field. They went 15 plays, 69 yards. And that led to Jane Daniels connecting with Zach Ertz for his first touchdown of the day. So that made it 17-14. Falcons then punted on their next drive. They went 3-and-out very quickly. And that led to another Commanders touchdown drive. And this was a Chris Rodriguez 2-yard touchdown. So that made it 21-17. And then later the Commanders made it 24-17. And, this drive here by the Falcons, it was like, all right, let's see what Michael Penix is made of. And they went 12 plays, 68 yards down the field. They converted a 4th and 11 for 31 yards. Penix connected with Drake London. Then another 14 with Ray McLeod. Had a 14-yard run there. And then they got down to the 5, and this is when I thought the game was over. They did another direct snap with Bijan Robinson, but it went over his head, and they lost a lot of yards on that. They got backed up to the Washington 26, but then Michael Penix came back, hit Drake London for 13 yards. No gain on the next play. Incomplete to London. So on 4th and 13, he hits Kyle Pitts for a touchdown. And in that moment, it was like, are they going to go for 2? What are they going to do here? But they did elect to go for the extra point. They get it. And then we went into overtime. Well, actually, the Falcons did get the ball back. And they got down to the Washington 38-yard line. Riley Patterson attempted a 56-yard field goal, and it ended up being short. So then we went into overtime. Commanders got the ball. They went right down the field, and Jane Daniels connected with Zach Ertz for a 2-yard touchdown. And that's all she wrote. 30-24, they improved to 11-5. They clinch a playoff spot. They're now actually the 6th seed. Now, because they have, I believe it's because they have a better conference record, they now pass the Packers, with the Packers losing to the Vikings yesterday. Packers are now the 7th seed. So if the Commanders win next week, they will be locked in as the 6th seed. Packers will be the 7th no matter what happens. So I thought that was interesting. But, yeah, credit to them. I really did not expect the Commanders to be a playoff team this year. I thought this was going to be another tough year for them. But they have an offensive rookie of the year in Jane Daniels. Dan Quinn has done a nice job. I wasn't a big fan of the hire, but he's done a nice job. And this team has definitely surprised me. And it's amazing how this team in 1 year was able to go from 4 wins to now 11 wins, and they could possibly go to 12 playing Dallas next week. I didn't see it coming. But it's a credit to that organization. They drafted the right quarterback, and Dan Quinn has got that team playing really well. So they're a threat. The NFC playoffs, the playoffs in general I think are going to be good, but the NFC playoffs specifically, look at all the teams. I think the Bucs are going to win the division. It didn't look good for a moment. I thought, the Falcons going to win this game now. But even the Bucs, they're going to finish with 10 wins. All these teams can make a run that are in the NFC playoffs right now. So it's going to be a lot of fun watching these teams match up against each other after next week. But, yeah, NFC playoffs have the potential to be really good, especially when you have 3 teams from the NFC North who all have 11-plus wins. And, we're going to have the Lions and the Vikings playing for the division next week in Detroit on Sunday Night Football. That game is going to be really, really exciting to watch. So, but yeah, credit to the Commanders. Falcons, definitely a tough loss for them. The Buccaneers are playing the Saints. They're playing the Panthers. I think the Falcons will win, but it's really going to all come down to, Spencer Rattler and the Saints trying to upset the Buccaneers in Tampa, and I don't see it happening. But you never know. But in terms of the stats for the game, this game here, Jane Daniels, he went 24-36, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 127 rushing yards in this game. Brian Robinson Jr. 60 yards on the ground. Chris Rodriguez Jr. He had 16 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Yeah, Commanders ran the ball for over 200 yards in this game. Olamide Zaccheaus ended up being the leading receiver. He had 8 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz, 6 receptions for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, only 1 catch for 5 yards. Falcons did a good job in limiting him last night. And then as for the Commanders' defense, 2 sacks on the night. For the Falcons, Michael Penix, 19 of 35, 223 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Bijan Robinson had 90 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Algier had 19, Ray McLeod 14. Drake London, 7 for 106. Kyle Pitts had a decent game, 4 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown. Darnell Mooney had 2 for 37. And then the Falcons' defense actually had 5 sacks on the night, so they got after Jaden Daniels. There was that one play at one point where it looked like he really injured his legs. But he ended up being fine. Training staff went to go look at him. He said he was fine. So, yeah, that's the last thing we need is Jaden Daniels getting hurt. But, like I said, pick it up the win. Looks like they're going to they are in a wild card spot. Now it's up to the Falcons, and the Buccaneers. What's going to happen there? Because everything else is pretty much wrapped up when it comes to the NFC playoff picture. Seeding is not finalized just yet because there's the possibility we could see a 1 seed become a 5 seed, depending on what happens with the Vikings and the Lions. But really the only thing that is not completely wrapped up yet is the NFC South. So if the Buccaneers win, they're in. If the Bucs lose and the Falcons win, then the Falcons are in. But based off of the matchups for next week, I do think that Tampa is going to get in. But we'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think about this game. What were your takeaways from it? Let me know in the comments. So we're going to take our first break of the show now. When we come back, we'll talk about the Bengals, their win over the Broncos, and how they could still make the playoffs going into this final week of the regular season in the NFL. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.